It's officially past noon here on this kind of cold fall Friday. I want to thank you all for joining us for this event. I want to note first off, right up front, that this is being recorded. That's one thing that we have been doing with all of these events with candidates and other policy events, is recording them so we can share them on our social media, on our website, everything along those lines, and make it very transparent and readily available for our members. So please do know that this is being recorded. But today we are excited to be joined by our county auditor, Melvyn, who's going to talk to us a little bit about election integrity. As we've heard a lot in the news and in other areas and on social media and other places recently, we know that, election integrity is kind of a hot button issue right now about, whether with absentee voting, mail-in voting, in-person voting during a pandemic. There's just a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty surrounding, what's the best way to vote? What's the most legitimate way to vote? What's the safest way to vote? So we thought that it would be a really good resource for our members to bring Melvyn on and talk a little bit about what's going on within the auditor's office as they oversee this election, give us an update on the numbers, give us an update on the resources and different options that are available to voters to vote, whether that's absentee by mail-in ballots, whether that's voting in person, satellite voting, a whole slot of different options that are available to us here in Pottawattamie County to make sure that we can vote however we feel safest and most comfortable. So with that, I want to start by just turning it over to Auditor Melvyn, and he's going to provide us kind of some introductory remarks, and then we'll jump into Q&A. If you do have questions, do please make sure that you type them in the chat box. We do have individuals muted just for, keeping an orderly meeting going. But if you have questions, type them in the chat box. I'll make sure that they get asked to Melvyn once we hit the part of Q&A during this session. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Melvyn so he can provide us some introductory remarks to get us started.
Okay, thanks a lot, Drew. For you folks that don't know me, I'm Melvyn. I was supervisor for 16 years and worked very closely with Marilyn Joe Drake, the auditor over here, for those 16 years. And I thought that I knew kind of what went on in an auditor's office. But after I get over here and see the amount of work that's been done, that goes on here, why it's kind of mind-bending, especially in elections now. And this is my first general election, so I'm learning something every day. And it's a very complicated, detailed process. And I like to tell people we've gone through the 4 C's this year. Our biggest concern was cybersecurity. And we were, doing everything we could to make sure that our elections stayed safe in that manner. And then COVID hit just in March. So we're scrambling with PPE and social distancing for our primary. And that was the second C. And then, of course, during the primary, we had the chaos of the protests in Omaha that were threatening to come over here on primary election day. And now we have construction going on. So it's difficult for people to get around and get up here to turn in their ballots and vote. So it's been quite an experience, and it's a lot of fun and a lot of interesting things going on. And the phone just rings off the hook with people with questions about, where to vote, where's the ballot drop box, do you have my ballot? They're getting a lot of information from other mailers or texts that says we haven't received their ballot yet. So we have to check back into the system and assure them that, yes, we do have your ballot. So far, and of course it's unprecedented, you all know that, we have mailed out over 22,000 ballots. And we've had so far 2,300 people voting in person at our election building over there, 508 South 6th Street. If you voted in the primary, we're in 2018, when we were remodeling the second floor, we voted over there. And there's always quite a few people, 150 to 250 people a day coming through there, and it's probably going to increase. So far, we have received back, I'm looking over my numbers, close to 20,000 back. And there are still 5,200 ballots out. And before I forget it, if you have a ballot at home and then change your mind and decide to vote at home or vote at the polls, take that absentee ballot with you, because it'll be very confusing for the poll workers if we know that you have a ballot out and you insist that you didn't vote it. You should bring that back with you and surrender it, and then you'll get a new ballot. Any other numbers? Do you want me to just kind of go down then through this list here of voting options? If I miss anything, Drew, you let me know and we'll recover it.
Yeah, if we can kind of start a little bit with the different options when we look
Okay,
at absentee voting,
So
mail
the
voting,
different-
in-person
yeah.
satellite.
Yeah, the different options you have, of course, is to request an absentee ballot, and many of folks have already done that. Tomorrow is the last day for us to mail out ballots. 10 days before the election, we cannot mail out any more ballots. So a lot of that's already covered. And if you do have a ballot, you can either bring it up to the auditor's office. You can put it in the drop box out by the parking lot next to the squirrel cage jail, or you can mail it in. And while we're talking about the mail and the post office, we have a very good relationship with the Council Bluffs Post Office, and they bend over backwards to take care of those ballots. And some may get misplaced, but not for very long. They do everything they can to get them here. That on October 5th, when we mailed those ballots out, over 20,000 of them, they went to the bother of bringing a truck to the courthouse rather than us taking them down to the CB post office. Then they'd have to load them into a truck and take them to Omaha. They just brought a truck in, we loaded them all up. It was stacked full of those 20,000 ballots, and they run them straight over to Omaha from here. The next day, on the next two, that was on the 5th, on the 6th, we received ballots back in the mail. And so they're doing a very good job of taking care of them. And of course, if you do want to vote early in person, which is technically an absentee ballot, you can do it at our election building there on South 6th Street. I don't think I missed anything. Well, of course, then you can go to your polls on Tuesday. And just another FYI, they had a water leak at Broadway Methodist Church. We had 3 precincts voting there, and they called yesterday and said they couldn't handle us. So Christy, my election deputy, got on the phone with Diane Ostrowski at the CB schools, and she's going to let us into AL. So if anybody you know is in precinct 6, 7, or 11 that we're supposed to go to Broadway Methodist, they will now be voting at AL. We tried to stay out of the schools this fall because of the pandemic and the kids still in class. So we've been commandeering our churches, and out in the small towns, we'll go to the community buildings. So normally we'll have 40 precincts, but we've whittled it down to 26 just because of the number of poll workers that we can keep working. A lot of the older folks have bowed out because of the pandemic. So,
Okay.
So we're getting through it. It's a crazy muddle, but we're doing the best we can and keeping everything nice and tidy and secure.
One question we had, Melvyn, is from Joni Poor, and I was going to ask the exact same question in 2 different kind of things along these lines. Will Broadway Methodist have signage to tell people where to go? If people show up there, they know where to go then, or is there announcements on social media, on the website? How is that information getting out, and where's the best place to find that?
Both. We'll have a note on the door to direct them to AL, and we'll also post it on our website. Our website, for anybody that doesn't know, is elections. I wrote it down just for you. elections.pottcounty-ia.gov. And if Drew could put that out on his website, that would, just to help direct people to our website would be a lot of help. And there's FAQs on there and all the information you need. There's a place that will tell you where do I vote. And we've got that Broadway Methodist information to the Secretary of State. So if you press the button that says, "Where do I vote?" it'll take you to the Secretary of State's website. You have to identify yourself as not a robot, of course, and then put in your address, and it'll tell you where to go.
Melvyn, one question I had
And
too.
also on our website is how to track your ballot. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you can finish on tracking your ballot. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, there's another button on there to track your ballot. It'll take you to the Secretary of State's website also, and it'll tell you if our ballot's been received. That goes into the system. All these ballots that come in are barcoded with your name and address, and it's scanned into the system, and we know that your ballot is here. And that is posted then at the Secretary of State's website, and you can track your ballot that way.
Thank you. And then along the lines, you mentioned that we've had such an influx of mail-in votes and absentee votes, kind of two questions into one. Do you know how those voting numbers compare to previous years as far as turnout? And do we have any demographics of, what groups are turning out more, or what areas are turning out more? Is there any information, not only about the number, but about who within those numbers may be voting the most?
If there's a report that you could run, I couldn't tell you. But no, we just take them, and where they come from or who it is, we don't care. We just want your ballot. So we couldn't tell you if more Democrats or more Republicans are voting early. We couldn't tell you if it was urban or rural people voting early. We don't track that. And if there's a way to run a report on it, we don't have time to.
Okay. So you really just kind of have the numbers, and then you would obviously know the precinct and things like that, where they come from. So that would be the only way you could really break it
Right.
down as to, okay, geographically where it came from. Okay.
So most of them do naturally come from Council Bluffs, because that's where most of the people are.
Is two quick questions. One, there was a pretty good suggestion about maybe putting a ballot drop box out county, and there's probably some logistics about dumping that and getting it cleared out. But the other thing is, when do you count? Can you count the absentee ballots prior to November 3rd? Can you start counting the morning of November 3rd so that the results are
We can start in a general election. We can start counting on the Monday before the election. They'll be back here in the back ballot room, and nobody's allowed. They don't even allow me back in there. But this year, with all the influx of absentee ballots, they're allowing us to open on Saturday. And we'll have an absentee board in on Saturday, and it's consists of, I think we're planning on about 30 people, and they will be in teams of 3. There'll be one Democrat, one Republican, and one no party. And they will each get a tub of 400 ballots. They will count those ballots to make sure there's 400 there. They will open them up and then count the ballots again to make sure there's 400. Then they'll be stored back in the ballot room until Monday morning, where Christie will start counting. And the parties are allowed 5 people of each party to observe the opening of the ballots. And I don't know if we can get 10 people back in that ballot room or not to watch them being counted, but we do have a few party folks come in and observe. So that's the probably the processes that a lot of people don't see, other than those people that are actually sitting there opening the ballots, and the strict guidelines that they have to go through to make sure all the ballots are in the, out of the envelopes and properly put back into the right tub. And then Monday morning, she'll start counting. Whether we can get 25 or 30,000 ballots run through that one machine in 2 days, we don't know. We've never done it before.
A follow-up question to one of the questions before about demographics and reporting. Will those statistics, as far as male, female, absentee, et cetera, and any of those different categorical pieces, breaking down demographics or different sects of the citizenry, be available after the election? Is that stuff that's available after the election to be able to see kind of those breakdowns in detail?
Yeah, well, that's a better question for Christie, but it'll be
Mhm.
broke down by precinct. Uh, Gender will maybe after we get through all the request forms, we might be able to tell something. But as far as breaking it down by gender, maybe there's a way to get those numbers out. But if there is, it won't be until after the election.
And a couple other questions that we had is, will there be updates to the ballot counts on your website as counting is initiated and ongoing? This used to occur but hasn't in recent elections. So will there be a live kind of updating on the website of how many ballots have come in?
There will be the best that we can. Because with cybersecurity issues, if well, here's how the process works. On election night, we will have runners out at those polls, and when they shut down those 200s, those are the machines that you use, put your ballot in at the polls. When they shut those down, there's a certain process to get them shut down. Print out the tabulator tape and download it onto a flash drive. And then that flash drive is brought into the courthouse by these runners, brought up here by part-time, well, no, I wouldn't say part-time, but they're reliable volunteers that bring those up to Christie. She'll put that into the tabulating machine. But if somebody wants a printout, she's going to have to shut down that tabulator, get out of it, print a report, and get it to our social media expert, Andrew Moats, who will put it on the website. If these flash drives keep coming in, it just slows things down if we have to stop and print out a report. We used to do that years ago, but with the new technology we have and the cybersecurity, she could not take that flash drive out of her tabulator, give it to Andrew, put it in to post it on his website, because he's connected to the internet. So if for whatever short period of time that flash drive is connected to the internet, we have to throw it away. We can't put it back into the tabulator because it can compromise the whole election. So if there's a break, that we'll probably get a lot of them from Council Bluffs early on. But if there's a break in there, as those are coming in from Avoca and Walnut and Oakland, then we can run a report. But you'll get the final results quicker if she doesn't have to shut down. And hopefully we'll have all the absentees counted and reported soon after 9 o'clock.
Thank you. Another question we had is, do you foresee any challenges with this election? Obviously you're looking at some of the safety parameters on the election day. I know Chief Carmody noted that law enforcement is in cooperation with the auditor's office to just make sure there's a safe and orderly voting process. So can you maybe talk about maybe some of those challenges and just how those are being dealt with?
Yeah, we met with emergency management, CBPD, and the sheriff's office, and they will have some cars just kind of patrolling around Council Bluffs, and a couple of cars out in the county just dedicated to checking up on the polling sites. They've talked to 911. They'll have somebody dedicated to maybe an extra person there anyway to take care of any 911 calls if there are any disturbances at the polling places. No, I think public safety's got everything pretty well in hand. I was on a meeting a couple weeks ago with ISAC and the deputy at Lynn County, Cedar Rapids. He's just having 2 guys run around the county, and they're a much bigger county than we are. So I think that's probably pretty common for all the counties throughout the state, is just to have a couple of these guys on alert, just checking on the polling sites.
And can you touch a little bit on, in-person voting, obviously at polling places, what are some safety steps and some different cleansing and just
Oh,
sanitization and different things you guys are doing for peace of mind for
right,
people going to vote in person?
right. Well, of course, all the poll workers will be socially distanced, and they'll each have a table as you go in and check in and get your ballot and fill out your ballot. We'll have the little circles on the floor to make sure people kind of stay apart. We'll have masks there for to offer people to wear masks. They will not be mandated, and but we have them for people that choose to wear the mask. And this one person is dedicated. As soon as somebody gets up from their table after they voted, it'll be wiped down and cleansed. When you take your pen to fill out your ovals, you keep that pen. So there's no exchange of pens or cleaning of pens. You just keep that pen, and you can use it the next time you vote. If you think you can keep a pen around that long, why then you can.
Okay. Another question I had was about satellite voting. I know there's a couple satellite voting locations as well. Can you talk about satellite voting? I know President Kinney is on this Zoom meeting, and I know there's one at Iowa Western. Can you talk a little bit about satellite voting options?
Well, those were held last week. The satellite vote, I think it was October 16th or 17th. We were petitioned by a party to have satellites, and we had one in Carter Lake. And I think, I don't know, I can remember there's about 30 people showed up. And then we had one at Iowa Western, and I think they had about 2 voters. The people in Pottawattamie County just don't satellite vote very well. You go to like Johnson County, they just love their satellites. They'll have satellites all over town and all over the county and multiple days of satellites. And we've tried it before. We'd have satellites at the Salvation Army or at Iowa Western or at Hy-Vee. People just don't, around these parts, they're just not great at satellite voting. So we don't encourage it, but if we are petitioned to have one, we shall have one.
Okay. And do we have enough poll workers for day of?
So far, we do. They kind of come and go. I think yesterday we had one bug out on us, and last week there's another one. But we have some in reserve, and at least all our precinct captains, those that are more experienced and have done a lot of polls, they're hanging with us. But some of those others are getting fearful. And of course, as they listen to the news and they hear about the increase in positivity rates, they get a little nervous and don't want to get out.
And you kind of have a critical demographic and critical audience, obviously, on this call as well. What are things that we can do as, just leaders in the community and the business community and the overall, public and private sector in this community? How can we help you in your office as you prepare for this?
Well, if you're a business leader, you should be very concerned about your political leadership. And whether it's president or Congress or state representatives or even your county supervisors, when you guys are concerned about economic development, you really need to encourage all of your employees to go vote. And if you have to let them leave work a half hour early to go vote, you should encourage that. Or if somebody's voting in line at 7 o'clock in the morning on that Tuesday, if they get to work late and they said they were voting, you shouldn't deduct them. I think it's critical in our democracy that everybody takes part. This is probably one of the most important things business can do or a citizen can do. My mantra is voting is not only a right and a privilege, it's also a responsibility and a duty. And people, and they just need, even their customers, if they have customers come to the counter, they should encourage them to go vote. Ask them if they voted. And if they've got a "I voted" sticker on their shirt when they come into your business, thank them for voting. It's critical and very important. That's what makes our country what it is. It's the way, the fact that we can freely vote.
Another question that we had is the website indicates the office will be open tomorrow for in-person voting, but doesn't state the hours that it will be open. It's the same for the 31st on Halloween. Do you know the hours that the office will be open for in-person voting?
I don't know if it's 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. We will get that on our website. And I could run out and yell at somebody right now and find out. You want me to do that, Drew? I think one Saturday was 8 to 5 and the other Saturday was 9 to 5.
Okay. Yeah, you might just want to get that on the website and on some social media just so people can get that information as well.
And most people had typically in the past voted in the courthouse. It's not in the courthouse anymore.
No, it's at the election building. And we did that just because of the social distancing. When we get that number of people up here on the second floor, and it's hard for security to man that and keep people separated. So even though the weather might be a little chilly, lining up outside is probably the safest. And Matt, you had a question or a comment about the
Oh, I know one of the county supervisor candidates who is out county was questioning why out county people had to drive all the way to Council Bluffs to drop their ballot.
Okay, we've discussed that, and there was, it went to court actually, not in our case, but another county had drop boxes at Hy-Vee. And the Secretary of State determined that that was not very safe. They weren't under any sort of security. So we were only allowed one drop box. Well, first we were not allowed drop boxes at all. And then there was enough pushback that Secretary of State's going to allow one drop box per county, and it has to be on the courthouse grounds. It has to be under security, under camera, and so if you start thinking, if we did have one out in Oakland or Avoca, who's going to man that? Who's going to check it several times a day, bring the ballots in and the security of it? So it's, it would have been nice if we could have worked it out, but it's not allowed. But, absentee before, people have been doing it for a long time, absentee ballot, and they just throw it in the mail. And, if you want to make sure it gets there, you want to make sure that you put it in the mailbox early enough to make sure it gets here by election day. We're not really doing anything different than we've ever done, for the past 30 or 40 years. And it's just, we're doing a lot more of it.
Do you have a ballpark guess of what the turnout's going to be as a percentage?
Percentage of I'm guessing probably 60 to 70%. I'm no good at guessing. I always guess that. Christy and Marilyn Joe were always better guessers than I ever was. But, there's a lot of interest. We had a gentleman last week or 2 weeks ago. He was 92 years old, registering to vote. He's never voted before. And I've talked to other auditors around the state, and they said they've got these people that are 70 years old coming in to register to vote, and they'd never voted before. So it's picking up. It's picking up.
With the heightened amount and the increase in the amount of votes and ballots cast that we're expecting to see, do you have any idea or an anticipation when we may be able to first see some of the reporting come out on election night as to, the results?
Well, you should see the absentees right away. And so if we have, I don't know, maybe we might get 50% absentees. That'll give people a pretty good idea of where they stand, I guess, in winners and losers. But I don't know, I would, by 10 or 10:30, she should have everything wrapped up. It just depends on when that last flash drive comes in. And then, and then that doesn't take very long to get that downloaded and get it on the website. For those people who were following our website last spring during the primary, there was a little mess up. The server crashed. Our web host, Neapolitan Labs, wasn't quite prepared for all of the activity on that night. And they had just signed up several other counties elections websites. And so there was, I don't know, Clinton County and Woodbury County and Marshall County. They had just signed up with this web host, and he wasn't quite prepared for it. But I talked to Brian last week. He sent me an email and said of all the things that they're doing to ensure that they have enough server capacity to take care of all the counties that he contracts with. So it should work.
Okay. I don't see any other questions in the chat box. That pretty well covers the topics that I had to make sure that we had covered. I'll give one last chance to see if anyone wants to speak up or put anything in the chat box if there's any questions that haven't been answered. But if not, I will say thank you, Melvyn, for taking the time to be with us here today. I appreciate you getting this information out to people. I appreciate all the work your office is doing. I know you guys are putting in a lot of hours. So that's something that's going to be really important. And I see too, now we have a question in the chat box. It says, how many times a day do you empty the ballot box?
4 times. Well, empty it first thing in the morning, right before lunch, maybe about 10:30 or 11, and then after lunch, and then 4:30 before I go home, I'll go out and dump it.
Okay.
And we keep track of that on a sheet. Anytime anybody dumps it, they have to write down the time and who did it. So they're brought up. The ballots are brought up in a locked box, in a ballot box that's locked. And so after the ballots are dumped in that drop box, they don't ever, just from the time I dump that bin into the ballot box is the only time they're exposed, and it's locked immediately and brought straight up to the ballot room and counted, time stamped, and taken care of.
Okay. Well, as I was kind of saying before, we have another question from the mayor I see here now. How many different versions of the ballot are there? Rearranging the order of the candidates, kind of along those lines.
Well, there are 66 different ballot styles, and I'm not quite sure what Matt's asking as far as the rotation of the.
I think he can speak up if you.
Pardon me?
He can speak up if he wants. He needs to unmute. But I'm guessing there's ways. I know the auditor's office has liberties as to how they list candidates on the ballot, but I'll let the mayor speak for.
Yeah, that was my question. Typically in the past, so that one candidate's not always the first choice on everybody's ballot, they kind of randomly rotate them in.
Well, it's not random. They are rotated in a certain manner. Now, if I'm out in Grove Township, that's the ballot I get for Grove Township, and I don't know who will be first. The Democrats are always first, and I'll explain that later. But for the Republicans, Brian Shea and Tim Wickman, I can't remember now which was first. I think Tim was first, but if you go to another ballot style, Brian Shea's first. They will just rotate those between the different ballot styles. And the same with the Democrat candidates. And if, only in those places where there are multiple seats being filled. That's the rotation. Now, as far as the people's question, why are the Democrats listed first? Why is Biden's name above Trump? Why are Lisa Lehman and Fran Parr above Tim and Brian? That was a state law instituted, I think, 2 years ago. It used to be that the county auditor could select which party was first. And of course, Maryland Joe always put the Republicans first. But state law required that we have to alternate that between years. So in 2022, during the governor's election, the Republicans will be first. In the 24 election in this county, the Republicans will be first. And then in 26, the Democrats are first. So they've got a rotation made out, and that's the way we have to do it.
Are there any other pieces, obviously the voter ID bill that passed a couple years ago, and the legislature had some implications on voting, both in person and mail in. Are there other things of value that you think would be good for this group to know that policy implemented and added to the process?
As far as voter ID, you mean?
Yes,
Well,
that's
yeah.
complete.
Make sure you take your driver's license with you, or your PIN card. If you don't have a driver's license or a valid picture ID, you can get a non-operator's ID from the DOT. I think military IDs work. People will call in wondering, where is their, oh my goodness, I forgot to plug my pad in. You guys really suck my battery. Hang on. I hope I can charge up enough to answer the rest of the questions. Where was I, Drew? Oh, PIN.
Talk about voter ID and pins and bringing an identification.
I don't have my PIN. Where's my PIN? And I say, well, you don't have one because you have a driver's license. Those PIN cards were just mailed out to people who did not have a driver's license or photo ID.
Well, as I was kind of saying about 10 minutes or so ago, once again, we don't have any other questions in the chat box. I've covered the questions and the topics that I wanted to make sure that we touched on. Melvyn, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think is pertinent for this group to know?
Well, from the phone calls we are getting, there's a lot of misinformation going on out there, whether it's stuff you get in the mail or whether it's text or rumors on social media. Just if you have questions, call the auditor's office. Check our elections website, and there's just too much missing.
We might have lost him momentarily. I'm guessing he was going to say that there's a lot of election misinformation out there. So just make sure that you're validating all of the information that you see out there. In the event that he may have timed out or lost his battery, or it may have died, I'll wrap this up. I appreciate everyone being on for this session with County Auditor Melvyn Hauser. I think we got some good information out about the general election coming up here in now about 9 days, I believe it is. So it's something that's, very quickly developing, and it's obviously we're seeing a lot of activity and a lot of turnout, as Melvyn said. So I just appreciate everyone being on this call to get some of the most up-to-date information directly from the auditor's office. And thank you very much for your questions. And also thank you for all your support of the Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce. Please do continue to attend our events. We do have a few Meet the Candidates events next week. On Monday, we have both David Young and Cindy Axney, our candidates for U.S. Congress. And then on Tuesday, we have Rick Stewart and Suzanne Herzog, who are no-party candidates for U.S. Senate. And on Wednesday, we have Joni Ernst, our sitting U.S. Senator, running for re-election. So please do use those as resources as well as chamber members, and please do attend if you're able. Thank you again, and everyone have a great weekend, and stay safe out there and enjoy the rest of your Friday.